Good afternoon, everybody. You are listening to the new WCEG Network on WCEGTalkRadio.com. If you're there, just click the live stream and you can pick us up live. Watch us live on your smart TV at YouTube, WCEG Network. I'm Norman A. Carter Jr., your show host for Issues and Answers for the next 2 hours. We're the worldwide community empowerment group, that's WCEG, where we speak life into the community. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and on Instagram at WCEG_talk_radio or at WCEG Network. Join the conversation. Come in or Skype at 1-678-619-1402. That's 1-678-619-1402. Ask your questions, make comments, voice your concerns. Let us hear from you at 1-678-619-1402. I'd like to add that the topics and opinions of me are mine alone and not the WCEG network. I'm taking personal responsibility for my strong opinions. Thank you for your continued support. We're going to cover a lot of topics today, but I'd like to begin and take us back to the past. In March of 1939, jazz singer and song stylist Billie Holiday wrote and recorded. She didn't write it, I'm sorry. She recorded a song entitled Strange Fruit. She sang the song throughout her career, even until her death in 1959. The song begins, "Southern trees bear a strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood on the root. Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze. Strange fruit hanging from poplar trees." Some of that strange fruit were African Americans attempting to live the American dream. Many of that strange fruit were African Americans, the ancestors of many of you listeners who were attempting to vote. And that's the theme of the first part of our program. Let's go back a little bit to Sunday of March 1, 2020, this year. There was a celebration of the 55th anniversary of the March 7, 1965 march over the Edmund Pettus, soon to be John Lewis, Bridge. Nearly a century after the Confederacy guns fell silent, the racial legacies of slavery and the Reconstruction continued to exist throughout Alabama in 1965. Even the passage of the landmark Civil Rights Act in 1964, a month earlier, had done little to ensure that African Americans had the basic right to vote in Alabama. Perhaps no place was Jim Crow's grip tighter than in Dallas County, Alabama, where African Americans made up more than half of the population that accounted for just 2% of the registered voters. 2% of the registered voters. The partial impetus for that March 7th, 1965 march over the Edmund Pettus Bridge occurred on February 18th, 1965. 26-year-old Jimmy Lee Jackson, an African American, was fatally shot by Alabama state troopers. He was trying to protect his mother. She was being clubbed by Alabama state troopers who were demonstrating in protest of Alabama's prohibitive voting policies. In response, civil rights leaders planned to take their cause directly to Alabama Governor George Wallace on a 54-mile march. 54-mile march from Selma to the state capital of Montgomery, Alabama. Although Wallace ordered the state troopers to use whatever measures necessary to prevent a march, approximately 600 voting rights advocates set out from the Brown Chapel AME Church on Sunday, March 7. The events of the Selma March galvanized public opinion and mobilized Congress to pass the Voting Rights Act, which President Johnson signed into law on August 6, 1965. Today, and that's the Edmund Pettus Bridge, served as a backdrop to Bloody Sunday that still bears the name of a white supremacist, and it's now a symbolic civil rights landmark. Now, who was Edmund Pettus? Edmund Winston Pettus was the last Confederate brigadier general from Alabama to serve in the United States Senate. An attorney, he was influential and an influential leader of the state Democratic Party, but did not hold public office until he was 75 years old. He served in the Senate for 10 years until his death in 1907. In 1877, Pettus served as the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan in Alabama. That's who Edmund Pettus is. Now let us remember a couple of things. And I know we get this statement about Southern history and Southern pride. But let us remember the Confederate rebellion that began the Civil War in the United States was an insurrectionist movement designed to destroy this country. The impetus of that impact was because of slavery in the Southern economy. Let's not forget that slavery was a worldwide inhumane practice and not just an anomaly in the United States. Understand that whenever you see a Confederate flag or edifice honoring a Confederate hero, it is a celebration of an attempt to overthrow the government of the United States of America. Now, what country on this earth would allow such a celebration except here in the USA? This is your distant history. Recently, the Pew Research Center conducted a survey of voter participation in the 2016 presidential election. A significant portion of that survey revealed that the African American voter turnout dropped by 60% in 2016. Some might find that figure unbelievable. On Saturday, this past Saturday, a congressperson from the state of Michigan noted in an interview that in 2016, Democratic voter participation in Michigan was down by 250,000 voters. According to the Forbes Foundation and other entities, 5 million eligible voters in Florida did not vote in the 2016 election. That extrapolates to tens of millions of voters across this country who did not vote in 2016. Some say that Hillary Clinton was not an attractive enough candidate. People were bored. Folks, there is always a reason to vote. There is a reason why many states, such as Georgia, have actively participated in voter suppression as recently as 2016. There is a reason why a Republican-led campaign to rescind portions of the Voting Rights Act succeeded in the Supreme Court. This is why we have seen recently polling locations in predominantly African-American sections of the state being closed. It even happened in my area of Gwinnett County, Georgia. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no excuse for not voting unless you are seriously ill. I am not being partisan, but it is a fact that in close elections, Republicans wish for bad weather on election days. It appears that many Democrats or independents will reconsider voting when there is rain or bad weather. Awful indictment. Republicans will stand in line and vote in a snowstorm or a hurricane. What's the issue? If you don't vote, you are trampling on the legacy of thousands who were murdered, beaten, and maimed so that you could exercise that precious right this year. Have you forgotten the legacy of James Earl Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner, who were murdered on June 21st, 1964 in Philadelphia, Mississippi? Civil rights and voting activist Medgar Evers was assassinated outside of his home on June 12th, 1963. They and so many others sacrificed their lives so that all of us, black, white, Asian, Indian, whatever, American citizens could exercise your right to vote. Was their sacrifice a waste? You're listening to the WCEG Network at WCEGTalkRadio.com. I encourage you to call in with your questions or comments via Skype or phone, 1-678-619-1402. That's 1-678-619-1402. I'd like to move past this voting to something that's related and of big concern this year, and that's the 2020 census. And I quote this from the latest, it's from March 6th, really, entry on the website of the Census Bureau. 95%, or about 143 million households in the country, will receive an initial invitation to respond to the 2020 census in their mailboxes between March 12th and March 20th of this year. The U.S. Census Bureau released informational copies today of the invitations. You can find them on their website at census.gov. Households are encouraged to respond when they receive the invitation. Depending on how likely the area is to respond online, households will receive either an invitation encouraging them to respond online or by phone. About 112 million households. Or an invitation along with a paper questionnaire. That's about 31 million households. All invitations will include a short phrase in English and 12 additional languages inviting people to respond online or by phone in their language. In areas where 20% or more of the households need Spanish assistance, the invitations will be in both English and Spanish. All households receiving an invitation in the mail will receive a second letter in the mail shortly after, reminding them to respond. Keep in mind, this is all by mail nothing by phone, no one knocking on your door yet. Then households that haven't responded will receive additional reminders, including a paper questionnaire in mid-April. Census takers will follow up with households that don't respond to the questionnaire by online or on mail or by phone. Why is the census important? The census was put into federal law and the Constitution of this country in 1790. Among the purposes of the census are: 1, to allocate $1.5 trillion to communities throughout this country. Now, when minority communities are undercounted, those funds go to the wealthier communities who do participate in the census. Failure to achieve an accurate count could cost minority communities as much as $8 billion. Now, where are those dollars spent? Those dollars are spent on roads. They're spent on schools. Businesses use population numbers from the census for business plans. And those businesses are your healthcare facilities, supermarkets, etc. Those funds go to support public transportation and, most importantly, setting up congressional districts so that you can have representatives in the national federal government. Now, here are some facts. It is illegal to use your personal information in the census for anything other than a count. I'll repeat that. It is illegal to use your personal information in the census for anything other than a count. And just as an aside, I know in the past few years there was a citizenship question proposed for the census. Various civil rights organizations fought against that. Therefore, there is no citizenship question in the census. It will not be used to track you or anyone else in your household who may have a criminal record. Another fallacy. It will not be used for that. If they were tracking you as a criminal, and take this from me, a former police officer, they can use your driver's license, your vehicle registration, utility bills, your bank accounts. They can track your debit or credit cards, lots of things without using the census, if that were the case. So please don't fall into that trap. There is a great concern about the accuracy of the census because your current federal government leadership has underfunded the Census Bureau. Your current government political leadership has underfunded the Census Bureau. That directly impacts impoverished communities, minority communities throughout this country. Now, this year, 80% of the census will be done online. That's 80% of the census will be done online. If you complete the census, and this is important, if you complete the census online, a census taker will not come to your residence. I repeat that. If you complete the census online, a census taker will not come to your residence. If you do not have internet access, be creative. Ask a friend if you can use their computer. Go to your public library. They're available. They have plenty of computers. Go early. Don't wait till the last minute. And thereby you can do your census online. And if you have further information, you can visit yourself if you have a computer on census.gov, or locate Stacey Abrams's website at Fair Fight 2020. As Ms. Abrams states, their organization, Fair Fight 2020, they're making sure that the infrastructure of democracy works. And that infrastructure includes your ability to have representation in Congress and in the Senate. And it also includes ensuring that every citizen is counted and that every citizen's right to vote is upheld. And that's our section on the census and on voting. I really hope that some of you have any questions on that or comments or concerns, that you would give us a call at 1-678-619-1402. That's 1-678-619-1402. Now, the third part of our program, and at any time you can call in with questions on any portion of our program. Feel free to do that. But the third portion of our program deals with policing. Now, we did a section on this, I think back in February, and there was a tremendous amount of interest, great response. And we were asked to repeat that because there was a lot of information put out that people were concerned about. And I'm sure that there are people who did not listen to that program who are listening to this program. And there are many important points of interest that I would like to raise. I think one of the instances, we're going to talk about police whistleblowers for sure. And I'm pretty sure we have some police whistleblowers listening to this program. And I encourage you whistleblowers, especially those involved in government or police whistleblowing, to give us a call with your comments at 1-678-619-1402. That's 1-678-619-1402. I just want to remind you that I have no special guest today. You, the listener, are my special guest. So let's share, let's learn from each other. I don't have all the answers. I'm sure you have answers to things that I don't have. So please, let's learn from each other. Create a little synergy here at WCEG, Worldwide Community Empowerment Group. Now, one thing I'd like to begin before I get to whistleblowers is something that I've seen in the news frequently. You've seen in the news frequently. And that's resisting arrest. There's a lot of misunderstanding about what constitutes resisting arrest. So for the purposes of this discussion, I went online and got some generic information from a reputable legal website. And based on my experiences as a police officer, I find this to be very accurate. So I'm going to read from that website. Resisting arrest occurs when a person interferes with a law enforcement officer's attempt to perform a lawful arrest. Some states call the crime obstruction. The crime can be a felony or a misdemeanor, depending on the severity of the actions of the person being arrested. Misdemeanor resisting arrest or misdemeanor obstruction can include actions such as running or hiding from a law enforcement officer. Running or hiding from a law enforcement officer. Misdemeanor, not a felony. Felony resisting arrest usually requires that a person either act violently toward the law enforcement officer or threatens to commit a violent act. When making a lawful arrest, the police officer is allowed to use only sufficient force necessary to accomplish an arrest or to overcome any resistance. Nothing more. Some states, and here is the trap that I want you to be aware of, some states provide that one can resist when one perceives that an arrest is unlawful. Please allow me, the court, to make a quote from the Borg of Star Trek fame. Resistance is futile. Now, I was interviewed about this subject by a broadcaster in Los Angeles, California last year, who was outraged about what I'm going to say next. And my quote to them was, "I am trying to prevent serious injury and save lives. You don't want to be right, but dead. Never resist arrest, even if it's unlawful." Are you listening? Never resist arrest, even if it's unlawful. If you are being beaten, try to protect your head. Submit to being handcuffed. Protest later. Protest later. Now I'm going to tread into some unpopular water. And I caution you that my opinions are my own and do not reflect the opinion of the WCEG Network. And I encourage you to call with your experiences or your comments to 1-678-619-1402. Michael Brown, the robber and thief of Ferguson, Missouri, resisted arrest. You may argue that the officer used excessive force, but if Michael Brown had complied with the officer's instructions, he would likely still be alive today. Eric Garner of New York was illegally selling cigarettes. Important to note that he had been arrested 30 times before this incident. 30 times, so he knew the system. He knew the deal, as we say in my neighborhood. But this time, when confronted by New York police officers, video evidence clearly showed he resisted being handcuffed. He kept saying, "Don't touch me, don't touch me." Now, you may argue that the police officers used excessive force, but had he just surrendered, there would not have been a scuffle. He would not have suffocated. He would be alive to defend himself in court or file a complaint against the officers. But he's dead. The officers are free. Keep in mind, I am trying to prevent serious injury and save lives. You can be right later. If you resist arrest, even if the police officer is making an unlawful arrest, you might needlessly lose your life. We don't need martyrs. We need people to live for their families, to live for their friends, to live to fight another battle another day. You don't have to resist arrest. Now, I just need to add this disclaimer, because some of you will say, well, he's a police officer, and a former police officer, and he's going to side with the police always. I've got that from even members of my family. That is not true. If you do like a short investigation of my life history, which you can do online, you will find that throughout my police career, I was a thorn in the side of the Philadelphia Police Department, where I hailed from. I would not stand for any injustice done. I did things that at the risk of my career while I was a police officer. This is long before there were whistleblower protections. So, and even after my career, if you do that research, you'll find that I was always in the forefront exposing police misconduct. And at one particular time, had I been paid attention to, a young lady in Philadelphia would not have been raped and murdered. And she was murdered in part, not just because of the offender, but in part because of police practices that I had protested throughout my police career. So you can check that out. You can check out my book, The Long Blue Walk, My Journey as a Philly Cop, which notates all of these events. So I am not pro-police. I'm pro-citizens. I'm pro-us. That's who I'm pro. Now, is resisting arrest ever legal? I talked about that a little bit, but I just want to emphasize the most important thing to remember is that in general, resisting arrest is only legal if the arrest is an unlawful one, such as when an officer is attempting to make an arrest without probable cause. But fight that battle in court. I'll tell you how to go about doing that later. But don't fight that battle in the street. Don't fight that battle alone. Don't think that screaming and hollering and saying, help me, the police are arresting me, and all of this sort of stuff is going to help you, so you want your friends to jump in. You will lose, they will lose. And then that adds an extra charge on you of inciting a riot. You don't need that. You don't need that. What you need to do is to take care of your business and take care of yourself. First priority, live through whatever you're going through. Don't get hurt. Limit your injury. Fight that battle in the court. Don't fight it on the street. Now, if you're involved in a traffic stop where the officer cannot provide you with a crime you have committed or an ordinance you have broken, is the officer allowed legally to ask or demand your ID? In all states, during a traffic stop, the driver of the car must provide his license, registration, and proof of insurance. That is unequivocal. You must show your driver's license, vehicle registration, and proof of insurance. And for those who have heard that you can keep your window up and press your driver's license to the window, don't try that, okay? If you think that'll work, you're going to wind up with a broken window, all right? And then that creates another issue. And that can be viewed as resisting arrest under the motor vehicle codes in most states. Remember, the driver's license is more than just an identification document. It is evidence that you are licensed to drive a car. Police can make different demands of someone who is driving a car than of someone who isn't. For example, a passport won't satisfy a police officer if you're driving a car, but that might be good if you're walking down the street. Keep in mind this: when you're driving a car and stopped by a police officer, you are not in a let's make a deal situation. Yes, you can ask why you were stopped. A professional police officer will tell you why as soon as they walk up to the car. But even if he or she does not, you cannot refuse to give them your driver's license. Stop this nonsense about tell me what you're stopping me for and I'll show you my license. You can't win that one. You can't win. Remember, even when you take your driver's examination, in that operator's manual, it tells you that driving is a privilege and not a right, which means that every time you're in that car driving on the road, you have to be able to justify that you are licensed to drive. As a driver, you are always obligated to show your operator's license if required by a police officer. If you are questioning the validity of being stopped, note the time and location you were stopped. If possible, get the officer's name and badge number. You'll get that if you get a ticket. That's easy. Do not be confrontational. The object is to let this moment pass as painlessly as possible. Never, ever argue about your rights. Police officer knows your rights, or refuse to show the officer your license unless he or she tells you the reason. You will come out on the short end. You can resolve improprieties later. Alone on the street is neither the time or the place. We have a call in question, which figures in drivers, and this is important. What is the proper way to stop at a stop sign, according to police standards? I'm told that this might change in the future, but for right now, what they call Hollywood stops, that many of you do, they're not legal. Trying to keep you from having confrontations with police, trying to keep you safe. When you arrive at a stop sign, take that as the same way you did when you took your driver's license examination. When you arrive at a stop sign, you come to a complete stop. A complete stop. If you're turning, you put on your turn signal. You don't slow down and roll and keep on going through the intersection. Some people call that a Hollywood stop. That's only going to get you stopped by the police. It will definitely get you a ticket. You're going to be angry. That's going to affect your pocketbook, may affect your family. It may cause you at some point to have your insurance rates increased, or may even evolve into having your insurance canceled or not renewed. Stop completely at the stop signs. Stop. It only takes a fraction of a second to stop. Don't let your wheels be rolling. Come to a complete stop and make that turn or go through the intersection. But please, Hollywood stops, as they call them, are illegal. Now, I'm presenting this information to you because there are people who do not have your best interests at heart. I'm going to step on some toes. They will never provide you with this information. These are people, no matter how professional or how religious they appear to be, revel in the attention and possible remuneration, that's money, they receive from being your spokesperson when you, a member of your family or a member of your community, has an interaction that is negative with law enforcement officer that results in serious injury or death. They will never give you the information I just told you about. They will never tell you about the dangers of resisting arrest. They will never tell you that you are obligated to show your driver's license when stopped by a law enforcement officer. They won't even tell you that you're obligated to stop at a stop sign. They are interested in being your champion in front of television cameras or your representative in civil legal proceedings. I am not indicting all people who wish justice for abused citizens. I am indicting those who are selective in the information they share with victims and with those who are concerned about the welfare of their community. Law enforcement officers who use bad judgment and take actions that exceed their legal authority need to be penalized and even arrested in serious cases of abuse. But in recent years, I've seen so many instances where knowledge and cooler heads could have avoided disastrous outcomes. And again, I want to emphasize, I'm not pro-police. I have a lengthy record of reporting or revealing incidents of police abuse during and after my career as a police officer. When I was in the Guardian Civic League of Philadelphia, I participated in meetings at several communities giving citizens the proper information, as I'm giving to you, for filing complaints against police officers who abuse their authority. We also made clear to those citizens that such thing as how to conduct themselves during a traffic stop, a pedestrian stop, and in cases where a police officer used abusive language or excessive force. The Philadelphia Police Department was well aware of what we were doing. I called attention to former Senator Harold James, the late James Holly, and the late Harold Arnold, and the late Alfonso Deal. They were part of this group that I participated in trying to help citizens. They participated in the meetings. We did not ask permission from the police department to conduct these meetings. In fact, they didn't want us to have those meetings. We just did it, just as I'm doing it now on Issues and Answer on the WCEG Network. And we are available at WCEGTalkRadio.com. Click that live tab and you can see my beautiful face on your TV. Or you can view us by going to YouTube and clicking in WCEG Network. Again, my name is Norman A. Carter Jr., the host of Issues and Answers, right here on WCEG. We are the worldwide community empowerment group, speaking life into the community. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and on Instagram at WCEG_talk_radio, and at WCEG Network. Join the conversation. Give us a call on Skype at 1-678-619-1402. That's 1-678-619-1402. We encourage you to ask your questions, make comments, or call in with your concerns. Because at some point, I'm going to get tired of talking. So let me hear from you. Please give us a call. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about this thing on police abuse before I get into whistleblowers. Many of you know I've written a book about those activities and some personal challenges I faced while reporting police officers who used their badge to participate in or protect criminal organizations. Reminder once again, I'm trying to save lives. As I have said during my police career and during my career as a manager in the hospitality industry right here in Georgia, sometimes you don't have to be right now. Sometimes it's better to be right later. That means there are times when confrontation is not an action in your best interest. Be alert. Be smart. Police whistleblowers, I hope you're out there listening, because I communicate with a lot of you via Twitter and on Facebook, highlighting Lamplighter Network, Serpico, and several others. In particular, many police officers, police officials, police commanders from Canada. They're having serious problems with policing in Canada, even in some places in Great Britain. And I'm in constant communication with these people. Their concerns are many. And of course, as you can see, there is a national campaign against whistleblowers. And I'm going to talk about that extensively. And my whistleblowers, I hope you're listening, and I hope you're about to call in. Now, for you citizens who are not police officers, let me ask this one question many of you ask. Why are good cops silent when they see or know about coworkers abusing their authority or engaging in corrupt practices? A lot of you ask that. Or you'll make the statement, well, all you cops are in it together. You protect each other. Not necessarily true. I'm a living example. I could tell you about many others, both alive and not alive today, who stood up when they saw times things of abusive behavior by their coworkers. But let's talk about why some other officers don't speak up. Number one is peer pressure. I'm gonna tell you, I experienced that. Peer pressure, dirty looks, dirty comments from your coworkers is unsettling. And when you do something as I had done, which attempt to expose a criminal organization that was protected and participated in by police officers who were in my district, who I saw every single day, it was dangerous. I can tell you that, very dangerous. And some of the dangers of peer pressure. Here's what happened to me. I can speak to this. They will not back you up on dangerous assignments. You get a call for a man with a gun, people fight, gang fight on the highway, you will find yourself there by yourself. There'll also be, and this happened to me also, false allegations or entrapment from your supervisors. I highlighted that in my autobiography. And many of my whistleblowers, particularly those up in Canada and New York, have mentioned a lot of these stories, a lot of this type of action from supervisors, their commanders. Also, there will be a concerted campaign to terminate you via firing or forcing you to resign. There's a lot of psychological pressure. The job of a police officer is tough. It's a tough, dangerous job. And it's made much, much worse when your coworkers, your supervisors, your commanders, and in my case, even the Internal Affairs Bureau, police commissioner, are all dedicated to silencing you, to getting you out of the way, to discrediting anything you say, to disparage your reputation. And when I talk about disparaging reputation, I can think of in Philadelphia, a young lady, police officer by the name of Penelope Brace, who sued the police department because they would not promote females to the position of sergeant. She went through hell. Character assassination at the top of the list. All sorts of harassment. They tried to drive this woman crazy. She was not deterred. She stayed the course. She won the case. And every police sergeant, police corporal, police commander, and now we have a female police commissioner, owes a debt to Penelope Brace because she fought that battle. She suffered tremendously, but she won. She was eventually promoted to detective sergeant. But the campaign to publicly disparage you, to disgrace you, to isolate you, to ostracize you is real. That still goes on today. Now, you also will get negative feedback from the police bargaining agents. This is for police officers who are whistleblowers. I experienced that because when I received a lot of harassment from my supervisors and my commanders, the first thing I did was I contacted the Philadelphia Fraternal Order of Police, Lines 5. And what I was told was that there was a conflict of interest and they could not represent me in any action concerning anything that was happening. So what it meant was they were all set to defend and get behind the bad cops, the crooked cops, who had a criminal organization that was extensive. And I'll get into that in a little bit. And there's also the other thing that affects cops going, turning in their, or reporting bad behavior on their coworkers is a lack of public support. It just isn't there. I don't know why. It's sad because most of the time when police officers are attempting to expose something bad which goes on in the police department, it is usually something that has an adverse effect on the citizens of that community. And it's just odd that there is no public support. I know in my own personal experience, I called news reporters. I called lawyers. I called so-called civil rights activists in the Philadelphia community. No one, absolutely no one, wanted to assist me. Not one person. And that type of standoffishness still exists today. And it's another reason why good cops don't come forward when their co-workers commit acts that even are elevated into criminal behavior. Because any cop or most cops who do that are ostracized by their co-workers. There are comments. There could be threats made to their family. There's threats made over the phone. And some people become angry. Some of you may not be aware that in Philadelphia, just this past year, a female police sergeant who reported sexual abuse and sexual misconduct among certain police commanders was punched and beaten by a police chief inspector while in the performance of her duty. Think about that. A chief inspector in the Philadelphia Police Department beat, while on duty, a female police sergeant. Nothing happened to that chief inspector. All because she filed a complaint against other police commanders for sexual misconduct and harassment. That's real. That can occur in your community, whether you're in Philadelphia, whether you're in Los Angeles, Cincinnati, Richmond, Virginia, or Saskatchewan, Canada. Those things can happen. That can happen. So I want you to be aware of that. So another thing which I would like to take on is how you should report instances of police abuse, of authority or misconduct. Now this is important. This is very important because, and I'll tell you about an incident that happened in Philadelphia. And that's where most of my experience happened as a police officer. Along around 1970, I'm going to say 1970, 1969, there was an incident, a gang fight outside of Germantown High School in Philadelphia. And the police who responded to that incident responded by attacking random students with billy clubs and blackjacks, beating them over the heads, beating them about the body, and then to justify whatever these cops did, they arrested everybody that they hit. All these young students, I think there were probably maybe anywhere between 8 and 10 students. This is just not my opinion, but there is a book where someone whom I did not know until I wrote my book wrote it, where the same incident is mentioned. Anyway, these students were beaten and arrested. I'll have to add, and I don't want to make this a racial thing, but the students who were beaten were African American students, anywhere from 16 to 17 years of age. Maybe one or two were as old as 18. They were high school students. The offending police officers were all Caucasian. Also, and this is a fact, that most of those officers involved in that arrest had bad reputations for abusing their authority by beating people. That's a fact. So what happened is, after these students were arrested, and they should not have been, and they definitely should not have been beaten, some of those students' parents filed complaints against the Philadelphia Police Department, against those officers who made the arrest, who unnecessarily attacked them with billy clubs and blackjacks. Unfortunately, those parents sought counseling from an activist group called COPAR in Philadelphia. And what happened is that COPPAR, I forgot what they meant, but what they did was they coached these kids and they coached these parents into what to say. Those kids and parents were coached to exaggerate their stories, to make them sound worse than what they were. So they filed their complaints with this coached testimony to police investigators. Now, a lot of us African American officers in there, we knew that these kids had a good case. I wrote about this in my book. We knew that these kids had a good case. They were abused, and it should not have happened. But what happened is, because this activist group had these young people and parents exaggerate the truth, those exaggerations were uncovered. They were found out, and what happened is the entire complaint against those 7 or 8 police officers were dismissed. That was sad, because we sat there and we figured that, you know what, we're going to get rid of these bad apples. Bad apples being these brutal cops who freely use the term making clubs trump in any situation and beat these kids unnecessarily. We thought that this was going to be a time when the police department was going to get rid of these bad actors. And because they exaggerated the truth, these people walked free. So that's one of the things I will talk about a little bit later, and after we take our break in a few minutes. But I want to encourage my listeners to give us a call here at WCEG Network. That's the WCEG Talk Radio. Call in or Skype at 1-678-619-1402 with your questions, comments, or concerns. Let us know what you're thinking. Let us know your influence. Now, I'd like to repeat before I take my break, the proper procedure when you're stopped by a police officer. Keep in mind, and I want to emphasize this, if you are asked to give information, present your driver's license, you must do that. You must present your driver's license to a police officer. You cannot play let's make a deal and say I'm not going to do it until you tell me what you're stopping me for. That's wrong. That's illegal. That will get you arrested. Not just get you a ticket. That will get you arrested. So please, when you're stopped by a police officer, roll down your window, listen to what the officer says, follow his or her instructions, do what they ask you to do as long as it's reasonable, and show them your license, show them your registration. And I want to go back to also touch on why police officers don't speak. Good cops don't speak about bad cops. Some of you know about that, what they call that blue wall of silence. And as I have written, that the mortar in that blue wall of silence is peer pressure. That's the mortar that keeps that wall in force. And that peer pressure comes not only from those officers, it comes from the fraternal organizations or bargaining organizations that represents those police officers. It comes from the commanders. And in my case, It came from a corrupt Internal Affairs Bureau. And that's a tough path to walk for any police officer. And when it gets to the point where your actions in reporting a bad cop may jeopardize your job, may jeopardize your income, may jeopardize the security of your family because you're the prime breadwinner, some officers make a decision where they allow their integrity to be bought. That's sad. I don't think that should ever happen. You need to have the courage of your convictions. And I say that to police officers and citizens alike. You cannot allow bad cops to continue to have the hold on police departments across this country, even in other countries, just out of fear. Because I'm telling you that there is a movement now, and I know this has happened in Philadelphia where there's a big lawsuit going on, that if you stick together, I'm talking about you good cops, you honest cops who are out there, speak up, support your brethren who speak up. And I want to put this out to the communities because you need to support police officers who speak up and speak out. Because without your support, their actions are muted. Without your support, these officers who you depend on to protect your community, to be honest, to carry about their jobs with integrity, will be lost. They will be silenced. They will be emasculated. You don't want that. You want to support the good cops in your community. That way, you prevent what happened in Ferguson. You prevent what happened in Baltimore. You prevent what happened in New York and other cities. In Chicago, where a young man was killed unnecessarily. You prevent incidents like the one where a young man was running away from police and he was shot numerous times. You prevent an incident that happened in Philadelphia, my home city. I talk about that a lot because that's where I get most of my experience, where a gentleman who got into a domestic fight with people in his family who was unarmed at the time was shot 92 times, and supported by the now disgraced police commissioner, Richard Ross. And he was disgraced because he was involved in preventing whistleblowers on sexual abuse from being heard. And that forced him to resign. So the blue wall of silence, the blue code is out there, but it can be broken, it can be defeated, but you have to stick behind those police officers who speak up. Otherwise, without your support, community, without your support, they're muted. And then you place their lives, their careers, their families in jeopardy. So please support those officers who have the courage to stand up for you, to speak out against abusive authority. It's very, very important. And I'm telling you that if you do that, your communities will be better off, your personal life will be better off. So stand up and speak out. And that's what this station is all about, standing up and speaking out for your community. This is the WCEG Network. We appreciate your listening, and we're about to take a small break, and we have so much more to get into, so I want you to line up your questions. Give us a call. Come on, blow up our phone lines. Get me to talking to you, okay? Thank you for listening, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. This is the WCEG Talk Radio Network.